Welcome back. We talked about this issue a week ago with Senator Gillibrand. The feds have now opened investigations into the handling of sexual assaults on 55 college campuses across the nation. This after staggering numbers came out about the rate of sexual abuse and assaults on college campuses. And 4 of those 55 colleges, by the way, located in New York State, and at least 3 of the 55 are Ivy League schools. 23 students at Columbia University and Barnard have filed a federal complaint into their schools alleging mishandling of campus sex assaults and asking if the schools are actually capable or incapable of handling these complaints and whether or not they should be handed over directly to federal or local law enforcement. Jimmy, your wife's organization that we've worked with, a tremendous group here who deal with victims of sex assault and gives them safe havens in effect. Do you believe the big problem here isn't trying to work around the margins of this, but colleges shouldn't be involved in prosecuting this or trying to handle this at all? It should go right to the law enforcement, right?
I happen to agree. I don't think, first of all, there's not a whole lot of success in institutions policing themselves and investigating themselves when they have a vested interest in the outcome. Colleges don't want to be seen as places, havens for people who do this, number one. Number two, it's very clear from the literature that they're simply not well enough equipped in order to do it. I mean, in my opinion, I understand that there should be some internal investigation within the school, but I think that when a crime, a sexual crime, is reported to a school, they should report it to law enforcement. If an adult victim declines to do so, and perhaps in writing, I suppose it's his or her right, but I think that schools, colleges should be duty-bound to report. If there's a robbery in a school, are they going to investigate it internally and decide, well, we're just going to expel them or not? They're going to call the police.
And the other thing we've learned the hard way is
if
the
somebody says they're raped.
The schools have 2 students that they have to look out for. This is an inherent, if not conflict, it's a challenge. And I want to get to this next one because I know Mark's going to opine on this one. New York's highest court says being annoying, not a federal offense here. You actually filed an amicus brief here. Explain this. We know there's an annoyance, but now we enter into the digital age. Talk about the case a little bit and talk about what it really means, because while it's funny, it also goes beyond just the amusing. It says what you can and can't do in a funny way online.
Well, it's not limited. The court's holding isn't limited to online speech. The case involved an online conflict between 2 schools of Dead Sea Scrolls scholarship, very arcane. But the point is, if you get a political phone call, right, an outreach phone call, and it annoys you under the statute as written in New York, you could be prosecuted for aggravated harassment because the speech could have been intended to annoy or cause annoyance, alarm, harassment, etc. And the First Amendment allows offensive speech as long as it's not A, defamatory, or B, fighting words, incitement, movie in a crowded firehouse. So the statute as written was overbroad. You're allowed to annoy. Lots of valuable speech is annoying, and that was the basic holding in the case, and they just adapted it, I should say, to the digital age.
So feel safe, Doug. You can continue to annoy.
Yeah, we'd be off the air.
There was a headline that many of us saw, Credit Suisse. They pled guilty to conspiring to aid in tax evasion. They're going to have to pay out a hefty fine, $2.6 billion in penalties. But there was no end to that. Nobody went to jail. They basically ended with that. And we learned in the election, if people needed, from Mitt Romney famously, that corporations are people too. But you don't believe corporations face the same level of punishment as real people do.
Well, in this case, if you look at this case, you look at them pleading guilty to conspiracy to create sham instruments to defraud the government out of taxes. That's what they're talking about. So they plead guilty to that. They pay $2.6 billion in a fine. And essentially that's paid by the shareholders of the corporation. The chairman, the CEO, they keep their jobs. They did nothing wrong. The 8 people that were indicted are all living comfortably in Switzerland. Nobody's asked for them to be extradited. The confidential, the people that they were doing this for, the wealthy people, they never had to turn over their names. So you have a situation where, you have a war against crime where all the consequences fall out on the poor, but they pull their punches when you're talking about, wealthy corporations and what they have to do.
And then the AG comes out and says, no bank is too big to jail. Well, nobody's gone to jail. But what does that mean? It's double talk.
There's another issue. If you recall, all of the domestic banks, the big deal that we all knew was that if they get accused of a crime, if they plead guilty to a crime, it affects their licensing. Well, there was a little footnote in the press release where the Attorney General, the government has decided that because of the gravity of the fine, nobody's going after Credit Suisse's regulatory
Right. They can
licenses.
still do what
So
they do.
they
Operate in New
still
York.
get to operate, and there's no ramification except one tiny portion of their revenues.
By the way, the stock went up.
Of course it went.
And
Because
there's the kicker.
Of course
Lawsuit
it
was
went up.
paid, it was settled.
I'll do the heavy lifting on this one, so
Okay.
you don't have to. But we lose good judges because it's politically unpopular to raise the pay of judges. And as a consequence, a lot of people have to go in the private sector, even if they want to keep the robe on. We're also seeing some judges being moved from the bench because they're there too long. Is there a truth that isn't politically popular to say, but the reality is good judges can't stay in the profession right now, whether it's because of pay or whether it's because age or whatever else, but it's getting harder and harder to keep the best people we can behind the bench?
It's really hard to justify paying a judge with the prestige and everything else and the power that's involved, something about 1/3 of what an average lawyer commensurate with that kind of experience would be getting on the open market. It's really difficult. And I know that it's unpopular to pay judges more, but so I think there's a solution to it, and it's maybe not such a popular one, but I think people shouldn't become judges until they've reached that age and area of their life in which they feel like they've comfortably made what they needed to do. Maybe they've already raised their family, put their kids through college, and they're ready to take a step back and pay. That's what I did. I gave up my private practice of law even though I didn't have to in Connecticut. In Connecticut, probate judges can continue to practice privately as well as be a judge. I found it to be too inherent, filled with conflicts of interest, and I've given it up. But I've made a sacrifice. I made a real financial
Judge, how
sacrifice to do it.
How do you feel about the mandatory retirement age? I mean, you're not old
Well, I
at
know it's 70,
Why?
and I think it's wrong because I think it's arbitrary, and I think age discrimination per se is arbitrary.
Well, it
so I think
failed.
it's wrong.
In New
Right.
York, there was a ballot initiative to extend the
Right. Well, if you're going
retirement age.
to
It
if you're
failed
going to
for Court of
expose it to
Appeals
people
judges.
on a mass level, they may get nervous that too many people are going to be curmudgeonly or in there too long, and they need to make way for younger people.
But it's not true.
Well, if 70
not-
It's just not true.
You won't have to worry about it for another 4 years,
70s
right?
and the 60s, 50s, and the 35.
You saw what I tried to do there, yeah. All right. Thank you for joining us. Judge, hey, you never know. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I use the term loosely. We will be back here with our panel next Wednesday for our legal roundtable, but we'll be here tomorrow night at 6 p.m. as always on RFL. Till then, everyone, have a great night.